Hey, this is former WCW, WWE, and TNA announcer Scott Hudson, and you're with Steve and the Scum on WGD Weekly.
This is fame, this is fortune, this is big, and this is bad. This is bump, and that's the stuff.
Oh, man, what was that? I think we're being invaded this week, Scum. Welcome to Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly Podcast, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. My name is Steve, and with me now, as always, the Scum. Are you with me, brother?
I am with you, brother. Pretty exciting week for us. Yeah, I guess those guys, when they said for life way back when, guess they meant it. But no arguments here. Pretty excited again. We keep the hits coming here. Steve, we got 5-time WCW World Tag Team Champion, card-carrying member of the New World Order, the Black and White, Marcus Buff Bagwell joining us today on the show, pal.
Dude, I'm absolutely ecstatic about this. And ironically enough, and I know you're up in Flair country, is your room black and white right now? Because I can't see anything.
Yeah, everything got real staticky and then kind of cut out. And now I'm looking at it. I'm not sure where the color went.
Yeah, there's a man with a deep voice up in the corner just saying new world order over and over again. And I don't know where he came from. But listen, Scum, before we get any further, I wanted to get into a couple of things to let our new listeners know what we're all about. We're not your typical wrestling podcast. We don't focus on the current product, but we'll mention it from time to time, and it's not really what we're here for. We don't talk about anything related to spoilers. We don't give anything away. We focus on the best and sometimes worst moments in classic pro wrestling history. All of our guests, regardless if they're still active in the industry or not, are performers that you can remember and relate to from the glory days of professional wrestling. Tune in to us and listen to a new take on classic wrestling right here at WGD Weekly. Now let's get right down to business, Scum. What do you say?
Well, Steve, not to correct you there, but as far as the spoilers go, maybe not in the form that people are used to them on today's internet wrestling sites, but it wouldn't be that strange for you to hear us talking about a guy in a silver mask that's throwing on the Iron Claw hold and running by the last name of Jardine. I guess that's a spoiler you might hear a little bit on here.
Love that guy. One of the other few guys that can actually claim that he was two of the most popular mass wrestlers ever. Spoiler and Super Destroyer. That's good stuff, Don Jardine, the late, great Don Jardine. Like my man said, we have another great guest this week. He's buff. He's the stuff. Marcus Bagwell joins us. You know, Scum, we're looking through the shows and past guests that we've already posted on our Facebook page. We're building one heck of a lineup of special guests at WGD Weekly, and we're not even close to finished with great guests, are we, man?
No, I've been saying and I've been telling our followers and our listeners and all the great people over at Wrestling's Glory Days, which, by the way, always a pleasure to do business with them, Steve. Always a pleasure to be with you, my longtime tag team partner. But I've been telling them that there's been irons in the fire. And, man, they're still heating up. I mean, Buff Bagwell is pretty big. That's a pretty big shot in the arm for the show. We're really excited. We really appreciate that he's coming on. But again, like I said with Scott Hudson, like I said with Paul Ellery, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We got a lot more storied guests throughout the history of pro wrestling that are coming to join us. And again, I'm just really amped up. You know me, I was a big fan of that era. Kind of what brought me back into the world of wrestling as far as watching it was the New World Order. And one of the first guys down the chart to come in, you're either with us or you're against us. Well, Marcus Bagwell, he was with him. And, man, what a career move that turned out to be for him.
I completely agree with you on all accounts here. We got more irons in the fire than the Double Cross Ranch. But before we take another step down that aisle, so to speak, on behalf of all the admins, like you mentioned, Scum, we wanted to thank all of our readers and all of our listeners at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. We're growing in size on our page. We have over 13,000 followers and over 1,000 followers on Twitter, which you can follow as well at Wrestling's G Days. That's at Wrestling's G Days. So go ahead and hit that follow button. We update the best classic wrestling content every day. So, you know, I'm still excited about our interview with Scott Hudson a few weeks back, Scum. It was a great show. It was the most viewed so far on our YouTube channel, and it was awesome. Oh, and here's another thing. While we're talking about where you can see us, we're brand new now on iTunes. So anybody out there that has anything that starts with a lowercase I, go ahead and hit iTunes, find WGD Weekly, that download button. We greatly appreciate it. Obviously, everything's going to be for free. We really love to hear your input. What do you think about that interview last week, Scum?
I thought it was great. Again, Scott Hudson was fantastic. What a pleasure it was to speak with him and all those great stories of, you know, him being his early days with Global Wrestling Federation, much like our guest today, Boss, all the way up through the days he was in WCW and on Nitro, and even the Invasion, you know, where he was there in WWF briefly. It was just a pleasure, you know. It reminded me a lot of you and I sitting around just talking about wrestling. I would say Scott Hudson, first and foremost, a wrestling fan that wound up getting into the business and really making the most of an opportunity.
Extremely personable, real nice guy, friendly, told some of the best stories. If you haven't heard it already, go to our YouTube channel, hit it up, hit that subscribe button, and of course, like I just mentioned, you can go ahead and get it down on iTunes. Check out all of our past interviews. We got great names in there. We have former women's champion Leilani Kai. She was our first interview. It was really great. WWE Hall of Famer and manager of the Road Warriors, Precious Paul Ellering. And, of course, like we said last week or 2 weeks ago now, WCW, WWE, and TNA announcer Scott Hudson.
Great stuff in the archives and great stuff coming our way. Big news that we're on iTunes now. I guess you could say that Steve and the Scum are going worldwide.
5-time WCW Tag Team Champion, a longtime member of the infamous NWO, Buff Bagwell. He's with us now. Thanks for joining us, Buff. It's been a pretty chaotic year for you. I know this past year has been pretty crazy. We're extremely glad you can be a part of our show, and more importantly, and I know I speak for fans of yours around the world when I say we're glad that you're healthy. It's great to hear that you're doing better, man.
I really appreciate that, man. I had a pretty rough, April a year ago. It's been 14, 15 months ago, April a year ago, I walked in on my best friend manager that was dead, and then I had a real bad car accident 7 days later. The day that I had a car accident, I broke my neck again. I broke my jaw. I got 5 plates in my face. I was in a coma for 5 days. It was really brutal because it was hard to fix it again. I've been so young in my previous years to fix things. It was easier, but at 43, I broke my neck on the exact same day 14 years previous. April 21st, 1998, I break it on TV. April 21st, 2012, I break it in a car.
Well, let's go back when you got started into the wrestling industry. If I'm correct, you got trained by Steve Lawler, worked in North Georgia Championship Wrestling before getting your first piece of national exposure when you moved over to the GWF. What was your initial spark that made you get into professional wrestling? Take us through some of your favorite memories and guys to work with during these early days in your career. And if you recall it, where does the initial idea of the handsome stranger gimmick come about?
I remember and know every one of those answers, and they're all really good. Number one is what got me into it was Missy Hyatt. I was at the pool one day. My parents, the lumber company, when I was in high school growing up, and I was a rich kid. Well, they went broke my senior year. So my senior year, I thought I was working for my mom and dad, and they had money. All of a sudden, they're broke, and I'm out of school. So I'm like, oh, my God, what am I going to do? So I went to the Atlanta School of Massage, and I became a licensed massage therapist. I thought from there I could do some kind of sports medicine or something like that, and I was a real athlete. I was all county, all state in football and baseball, and I thought I could do something like that, And so when we got my license, 8 months, $5,000. I graduate and everything, and it is not for a good-looking male to do that business. It just completely backfired on me. It is for women and unattractive males. And I hate to say that. If who's ever listening, I apologize, but I'm just listing a fact. It completely backfired. I thought me being in shape and taking care of myself and being a massage therapist would work and help me because it showed the person I cared about my body, and the massage is about caring about your body and all that. It completely backfired on me. So I'm at the pool one day laying out, trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life at an apartment complex. I'm 19 years old, trying to figure out what I'm doing. and I see this blonde-haired girl walk up way across the pool where I can't hear her speaking or anything, but blonde hair, big boobs, all that. I'm looking at her, you know. Well, a couple hours later, no big deal. I'm walking back to my apartment, and directly across the hall, I even remember the rooms. My room was 1501, and hers was 1502. Do not ask me how I remember that, but I do. Missy Hyatt moves in next door to me. So that night, I just went, that's kind of weird, that girl moving in right next door to me. That's kind of strange. So that night, my wife comes home, and we're sitting there having dinner, knock at the door, open it up, it's that blonde-haired girl. I go, how can I help you? And she said, I got to tell on myself. Can I come in? I said, sure. So she come in. I said, my wife, Tanya, and, you know, we start speaking to her and everything for a minute. She looked at Tanya, and she said, I saw your husband today at the pool, and I said, move me wherever that guy lives. So the agent didn't know I was married. She moved in Missy directly across from my hall from me, and so Missy continues on telling us, don't y'all recognize me? And me and my wife both go, no, who are you, you know? She said, I'm Missy Hyatt. I work out of WCW, Hot Stuff Eddie. I said, well, I've heard of Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, you know. She goes, well, that's my ex-husband, and we got divorced, so I moved out of the house, and I got an apartment here. And so through talking for a few minutes, she goes, why are you not a wrestler? Why don't you? I said, those guys don't make any money. And she goes, our lowest paid guy makes $100,000 a year. I said, do what? So I got all excited and everything and asked my wife. So we get all excited. I call Steve Lawler and get all excited and go down to the wrestling school and get my brains beat out. I come back home to a wife, and she's like a little puppy waiting to hear all the great news, and we're going to be rich and have money. And I come back in, and I go, I'm not going back. Here's Mark Bagwell she's married to that has conquered everything. He was the starting quarterback of the football team. He was, you know, the leading home run hitter from the baseball team. He's the little brother. He got beat up. He's been in fights. He's been in jail. He's been an athlete. He's been a troublemaker. He's been a good kid. He's done it all. And I said, I'm not going back. And she went, you're kidding? I said, no, I'm not going back. It's just the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So some reason I went back the second day, and he eased up on me a little bit and explained to me kind of a little more how it worked. But it was still the old school days of not smarting kids up and, you know, laying it in and taking the bumps and hitting the ropes. And it was, you know, and so once he taught me a little more about it, I said, I still didn't see how WCW guys worked that much and did that because it was that rough, the floor. People don't understand how hard the mat really is. People don't understand that's a steel cable that I'm hitting that looks like a rubber band to them. You know, it's a steel cable at WCW with a garden hose and tape around it. It was all pretty for TV, but I'm telling you what it was mechanically made of. It was a steel cable, 3 cables with 3 garden hoses on them and tape. And you hit that at 250 pounds with your side that's all bruised. So it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, but he eased up on me, taught me a little more about it. I was able to do it. My very first match, I was the Fabulous Fabian. They called me the Fabulous Fabian. And I went out, and they made me the TV champ my very first match. So, you know, the boys were like, oh, he didn't pay his dues and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, who cares? This is about selling tickets, guys. Come on, you know. But Mizzy taught me the right way to, you know, treat everybody and shake hands and shut your mouth and sit in the corner. So I did what I was supposed to, and then the GWF opened up, and Bill Eadie is the person that thought of the handsome stranger. So I came out with a dozen roses and a stupid Long Ranger mask. All the guys thought it was a good, they liked it. It was a pretty good gimmick. And I didn't care. I had a job. I was trying to make it, So I did it, and then WCW saw me with that character, and they were going to keep that character. So they tried to buy the character from Bill Eadie, and he wanted $100,000. And they said, forget it, keep it. So they just brought me in as Marcus Alexander Bagwell. And I said, Dusty, because Dusty's who hired me. I said, that's not cool. I said, Marcus Alexander Bagwell don't even sound cool. I said, come on, man. I said, and this was during the time of Johnny B. Bad and Fan Hammer and Big Fan Vader, and this was a time for gimmicks, and then all of a sudden you had Marcus Alexander Bagwell. I was like, Dusty, that's horrible. So he said, no, trust me, kids. He said, trust me, brother. He said, we're going to bring you out, the kids, the Marietta boy, it'll work. And it did. It worked. People got behind the kid that was trying to fight through these badasses to get there, And, Rick Rude, I wrestled 60 dead guys, bro. 60. I quit counting at 60. And when I say 60, I mean not met them, not in the same company as. I wrestled 60-plus dead guys. Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Bam Bam Bigelow, Rick Rude, Mr. Kurt Hennig. The list goes on and on, bro. But, dude, I have seen super athletes be horrible at pro wrestling. And I've seen non-athletic people be great at pro wrestling.
That's very interesting to hear, and you share a sentiment from a lot of other performers, some of whom we've already spoken with. But let me ask you, we'll go back to 1992. I know myself, I was a senior in high school. Comes a year behind me. We definitely remember your debut, but who showed you the ropes around? You mentioned speaking with Dusty Rhodes, giving you the gimmick. Was he the guy that maybe showed you around, or did you pick up a buddy real quick that showed you the ropes in WCW?
He took me in right away. The entire company was like, why are you hanging out with that Bagwell kid? So I just sat in the corner and kept my mouth shut. And little did all the bad guys know that the biggest troublemaker in the room was the little quiet kid in the corner, which was me. So once the Nasty Boys and all those guys found out that I was a pretty boy badass, I was cool. I was in. But just being a pretty boy and in the pro wrestling world don't work. You get dogged out, you get bullied, you get drilled, dogged all the time. But if you're a badass pretty boy that can take the punches and take the jab and put up with all the stuff for a while, you win the boys over, and that's what I did.
Again, thanks for being here with us, Marcus Bagwell. In those earlier days when you came into WCW, you were pretty successful in the tag team ranks. You won the titles 5 different times over the years with various partners, Too Cold Scorpio, The Patriot, Scotty Riggs, and then years later, with Shane Douglas. Were there any of those 5 tag title runs that you had that you maybe considered more special for any reason?
I don't think there's anyone more special, but what gets overlooked in that situation, and I hate it, but it does get overlooked, is it gets overlooked that what I had to do to become World Tag Team Champion with 5 completely different human beings. Too Cold Scorpio, Scotty Riggs, The Patriot, all these guys I were champions with, they're totally different. That means I had to adapt to their style to become World Tag Team Champions 5 different times with 5 different partners. And it gets overlooked. So really, none of them were any different than the other one than me, because I had to adjust to them. All they did was be themselves, and I adjusted to them. Scott Norton, I adjusted to. The Patriot, I adjusted to. Too Cold Scorpio, I adjusted to. Scotty Riggs, I adjusted to. So I adjusted to them to make it easier for them, which made me a better wrestler and made me understand wrestling a lot better then.
Sure. Well, I mean, that certainly speaks to your talent to be able to mesh with all those different styles. I mean, there's a big difference between Too Cold Scorpio and the Patriot.
Yeah, and I said not just matching styles, actually to the point of being world champions. So it's a hard deal. It's not easy to become world tag team champions, dude. And then to have to adjust to the different styles. I mean, like I said, the Scorpio to the Patriot, that was my very first jump. I mean, they're totally different styles. So I had to adjust to their styles to make us both a good tag team together. They didn't change anything. I said, you just be you. And I adjusted to them. And I did that with all my guys, and I was able to do that. And that was one of my successes. That's one of my keys to success was I was able to do that. I was able to ad-lib. I was able to fit in. I knew what the rep was thinking. I knew what you were thinking. I knew what the guy in the front row drinking the Diet Coke, eating the popcorn was thinking. And I made that my business, and that's what made me have an 11-year run at WCW, because I looked and paid attention. I knew what everybody was doing. And I had a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, because people didn't care. They didn't go, hey, Bagwell messed that match up. They just went, that was a bad match. I didn't want to have a bad match. So I made sure this guy knew what he was doing. I knew what he was doing. If he was trying something that I knew that he quite couldn't pull off, I had a plan B for it. I mean, there's a lot of time and energy put in that. And then you put the cameras on you and say it's live. Now you got to adjust to this live. Now I know what the entire first 5 rows are thinking. I know what the ref's thinking. You got 5 guys in the ring, and the manager's on the outside. You got 7 people involved in one match. That's all got to be on the same page. That's a lot of talent, bro. That's hard to do. And I was able to do it. And I was able to put it together and do it without getting my brains beat out, because I was a young, pretty boy.
Well, again, that speaks a lot for your talent. I mean, obviously you pulled it off very well, if I don't say so myself. Moving along, I was going to get into next. You kind of a big break for you. When he came out on Nitro, you were still teaming with Scotty Riggs and the American Males, and you were one of the first people to take the offer from Eric Bischoff on camera to join the hottest thing that was going at that point, maybe ever, the New World Order. So suddenly Marcus Bagwell is buff. There's a new attitude, and there's a whole lot of success on a personal level, on a singles level that follows. Do you remember how it initially came about to bring you into the NWO fold, and whose idea was it to change the direction of the character and, let's say, create the buff persona?
Kevin Nash is the first one to speak up for me. Eric Bischoff was not a real big fan of mine at first. He kind of didn't like me, and even though I was even though I worked for him, we wasn't like big buddies, and he didn't see the talent that the other guys saw, and so the first one to speak up for me was Kevin Nash. He said, man, this guy would be perfect. I'm telling you this and that. So Eric wasn't with it at all. He said, I don't get it. Y'all are crazy. It was in Maryland when they asked me to join them. I'm trying to think of the town. Starts with an S. It was always up there. I can't remember.
Salisbury, maybe?
Salisbury, Maryland. That's exactly where it was at. And we used to always run television up there for some reason. We'd always do Baltimore Arena, and we'd do Salisbury and a couple other little towns up there. And in Salisbury, for some reason, we had a Nitro, and they had me come out and join the NWO. And it was a big deal, bro. So I was now part of the NWO. On the flight home, we were trying to figure out a name. I said, I need a name. I need some kind of name or something. And of all people, it was Nick Patrick. Nick Patrick, the guy that the referee for years for WCW, he said, what about Buff? And everybody just stopped and went, that's it. That's perfect. So that was it. Buff Bagwell. It was born, it was created, and there it went. The attitude just came from me just being crazy. I just went out there and just was, I remember being in Baltimore at a house show. And me and Sting were best friends, and he was watching me. I said, watch my match. So me and Scott Norton went out there, and Baltimore hated Marcus Alexander Bagwell's guts. But Baltimore loved Buff. That's two different people totally. The old, hey, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, or Buff with the dance, doing all that stuff, jumping in the front row, sitting down, having a beer with one of the guys, doing my strut. I did a strut in Baltimore, come to the back, Sting's on the floor laughing. He said, dude, that's what you got to do. That is it. You got it. He said, what was that dance thing you did? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, you did some kind of dance thing. I had to get a tape from who taped the show and watch what I did to redo it. So I didn't realize what I had done. So I had to watch what dance I did and repeat it. And so I just slowly would create little things like that. And then I started talking to the camera, and it just took off, you know.
Sure. If I could add something there quick, I would say that once you develop that strut and the persona, there were teenage and 20-something-year-old kids across the country that were partying, doing that strut and the double flex afterwards. So,
absolutely. I saw a race car driver win the IndyCar race, and he got out, he did the strut and went out to one knee with a double bicep, and I was like, oh my God, that guy did my thing. You know, I didn't even know who he was, but he was an IndyCar driver that won a race, and he did my whole dance, went down to one knee and did the pose, and I just went out and just was kind of joking around, you know, and it worked.
Sure did. And Steve can vouch for me, and we used to play live music in a band at times. We were no stranger to pulling that strut off from time to time. So.
Oh, absolutely.
So you're in the NWO. You're Buff. You got the strut down. You got the tan, the black tights. You're rocking and rolling. You get put into a singles program with Luger. That's
right.
Lex Luger. You formed a very memorable partnership with Scott Norton. Then had a great run alongside Scott Steiner. Produced some very entertaining stuff. It was during this time that you suffered that neck injury you mentioned earlier in the match with Rick Steiner. Sidelined you for a bit, and then when you came back, it seemed that the hometown crowd, so to speak, was ready to get behind Buff Daddy, like you said, and see him take off on his own. You were about to be one of WCW's top guys in the ongoing fight with the NWO. Instead, though, when you returned, you had that swerve and you tricked Rick Steiner and again joined the NWO. Now, at that point, was it talked about to bringing you back in the fold to fight WCW against the NWO?
It was a gigantic deal. They have made me the next biggest babyface in the world. Dude, I had 50,000 letters sent to me in the hospital. I had Desert Storm guys would touch my picture before they went out to battle and shit like that, bro. I had I was over big time. I mean, they could have made me the next biggest superstar. Instead, they turned me heel. And the people didn't like it. It burned them. And my parents were physically upset about it. I mean, like, it was a big deal, dude, that what they were doing. I knew what they were doing was wrong. But like I told my parents, they pay my bills. You know, I can't tell Eric, hey, Eric, I'm not going to do that. You know, but it was Eric's idea, and he wanted to turn me heel and basically take a crap on 50,000 people that were praying for me and be with him, and they could have made me the next biggest babyface. Instead, Rick Steiner beats me my first match back, and the whole angle's gone.
I remember thinking at that point in time that we would be seeing you alongside, say, Luger, Sting, DDP. You know, it would have been a perfect fit.
It is perfect.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing watching at home at that point. But not to change gears on you here completely, but on a personal level, being a fan of everything that was going on in that era, I always thought that the pairing of you and Scott Steiner was one of the best things that they had going with the NWO during that period, whether it was in the ring or your guys' promo work. So while we're still in that time frame, one thing that sticks out that I thought was hilarious was I remember one year they had all the promos leading up to Spring Break, Monday Nitro, where you and Big Papa Pump were, following down the road in the bus in the weeks preceding the event and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
If you could take us back, not only to the lead up of that Spring Break, but with some of your memories of working with Steiner during that period, it seemed like, at least from the chemistry that you guys had on camera, that you must have been pretty tight and enjoyed working during that time together. So if you could take us back to that Spring Break trip down there and just that time in general, we'd love to hear.
That time was when it was the hottest, man. It was rolling, and Eric had already give us, like, we were the only people, me and Scotty were the only two people that didn't have to check in with the booking committee. In other words, me and Scotty did whatever we wanted to do. We had a time segmented out, and we did whatever we wanted to do. We did everything we wanted to do. The Mark McGuire thing we did, all that we thought of. We thought of all the angles we did, the wheelchair spot, all that stuff we created. And Eric gave us the leeway. Eric gave us the okay to be whatever we wanted to do. So he actually told in front of the entire WCW staff, which was not good, he said, from now on, everybody, so it started getting a little bit out of hand where guys started doing things on their own because me and Scotty were doing so much crazy stuff. And so Eric had a meeting with everybody and said, everybody has got to check in with me or the booking committee except for Scotty and Mark. And we were like, oh, my God, Eric, don't say that. So instantly we had to equal the whole company. But still, we go out and do something, and then we beat up an old lady, or we just push everything to the max, man. Everything was just wide open. So it was just a lot of fun, We just flew around into those cities and had a good time, man. It was just a good time to be in the NWO, and it was a good time to be in wrestling. It was really hot, It was definitely the good old days.
Yeah, that was great stuff. I had to bring that up. I was a big fan of that pairing, and I thought your guys' stuff was fantastic.
Scotty had a real good charisma going thing, and Scotty was, what you saw Scotty on TV, he was real. I'm Mark Bagwell talking to y'all right now, and then there's also Buff that I turn into when I see a red light, but he didn't have that. He was Big Papa Pump all the time. And brother, and I don't mean that negatively. It's cool, but he just didn't know when to turn it off. It was constantly. I mean, when I was out there managing him, I was literally managing him. I was begging him not to hit that guy or pleading with him. He had to tape his two middle fingers together because he kept getting fined for shooting birds. Because he was just so mean. He was just so mean, and he couldn't help it. As soon as he went out there, he'd shoot a bird. Well, he taped his fingers together so they couldn't find him no more. So he shot a bird with two fingers and it wasn't a bird. So it was constant mayhem with him, dude.
I wouldn't want to hear anything else, to be honest with you. It makes me appreciate it even more.
He was stuck, brother. He was wide open. He was the real deal at all times.
Well, very good. So moving along in 1999, storyline sees Ric Flair and Roddy Piper as president and vice president of the company. And Buff Bagwell is suddenly one of the hungry young lions. He's taking a stand against the two veterans, and you wind up in a series of matches with both of those legends. There was the boxing match eventually where you defeated Piper, I think of Bash of the Beach that year. Tell us your thoughts and memories of working with Flair and Piper, and also how did the decision to put you and Piper in the ring with the gloves on come about? Is that playoff here? I believe you have a background in boxing, right?
Yeah, I actually was a Golden Glove state champion boxer when I was 12. But that had nothing to do with it. I don't know whose idea it was. I can't remember whose idea it was to do the boxing gimmick. I can't remember that part of it. But all I remember was that I beat Roddy Piper, I beat Ric Flair, and then I remember calling my father and going, Dad, we finally got it, man. I beat Piper, I beat Flair, we finally got it. The next week was the Georgia Dome, and I'm coming off a win off of Roddy Piper and Ric Flair. I mean, there's nothing that can stop me, right? David Flair beats me in front of 80,000 people.
Oh,
I mean, just railroad train wreck. I said, y'all got to be kidding me, right? And they said, no, we got. I went straight to Rick. I said, Rick, are you joking? You're gonna let him beat me? If he beats me, he's beat both of us. He's beat Roddy. He's beat you. He's beat me. He beat all of us. Why? Your son's not good yet, Rick. He was horrible, if you remember. He was absolutely horrible. So I went out in front of 80,000 people holding Buck Bagwell signs up, and I got beat in the middle of the ring by David Flair.
At this point, you've been through the ups and downs of the NWO, fighting some legends with Piper and Flair, and you got to take that fall in the middle of the ring with David Flair. But we move on. You're a performer now in the New Blood faction, and you and Shane Douglas feuding with Flair and Luger again after the Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo relaunch on Nitro in 2000. You worked a great program with DDP around this time, and even there was a feud where you and Luger had eventually formed a team and were battling Goldberg. And so many stories have been told and opinions given about this type of time frame in WCW. We recently spoke with Scott Hudson on this, and he talked about the very same time period. So what was your take, being one of the company's biggest stars at the state of WCW?
Yes, that's exactly what went down. Me and Dallas had a real good angle, and then me and Lex had it was perfect. I mean, think about it. It was called Totally Buff. We actually were on the cover of the Next to the Last magazine of WCW. The next cover, the next month, was Dallas Page, and we had Vancouver Judy on the forklift match, Judy Bagwell on the forklift match, and then WCW was over.
What was your take on all of that? What was your take on some of the things that was going on behind the scenes later on that same time frame?
It was mayhem. There was no fixing it. It was just a bad train wreck that nobody could fix when Russo came in. Yeah, he had that Mexican kid beating you a bunch of times. I don't remember his name. Because Russo had everybody going in different directions. And then they figured out Russo didn't know what he was doing. And they brought Bischoff back. And then they tried to make Bischoff and Russo work together. And so Bischoff had his guys, which I was one of Eric's guys. And Russo had his guys, which was like Jeff Jarrett and Road Dogg and those guys. And you could always tell who was running things according to who was getting pushed. If it was Steiners, Lugers, and Bagwells, Bischoff was running things. If it was Jarrett's, the Mexicans, and kind of the mid-card guys, it was Russo in charge. And together it didn't work either. So it was just, I got to visualize it all falling down, and there was nobody that was going to fix it. On the New Blood thing, they gave me a piece of paper to go out and cut an interview against the Macho Man, Randy Savage. This is the Macho Man, which he's one of my 60, by the way. The Macho Man, Randy Savage. They had me cut an interview that cut him to the bone. We were main event on Thunder the next week after I cut the interview, and he beat me up for 12 straight minutes in the ring. About 3/4 shoot. The whole time. He has all the girls slap me, beat me. He hits me with every move he can hit me with. I think I did 2 things to him, just out of fighting for my life. And he beats me, and I got to the back, and I said, "What?" I said, Randy, are you kidding? I said, "Why would you do that, dude?" I said, "All you did was make a main event match. It could have been real good. You made it real stupid." And he said, "Brother, you never talk like that about me. Yeah, I heard what you said on TV about me." And I saved the piece of paper, and I handed it to him. And I said, "They told me to say it." And he just totally, his face was like, "Oh my God, I feel like an idiot." I said, brother, I didn't go out and make that up. I said, Eric Bischoff wrote that on a piece of paper and had me say it about you. This is his angle. So all of the old-timers hated the New Blood thing. I thought it was great. We could have dogged them out for being old. They could have dogged us out for being young and inexperienced. It would have been a whole new creation. I thought it was great. But the old guys didn't like it. They didn't like being called old. They didn't like it, and so they fought it, and it didn't work, and WCW went down the tubes.
That's an incredible story. It's something I've noticed that you came into the business, and you came into WCW, and wasn't very favored by Eric Bischoff, but by the end of it, you seem to have had a good working relationship, at least with him.
Oh, yeah, we rode Harleys together, and we became Harley buddies, and we rode Harleys. You know, he lived in Mapleton, right beside Dallas Page, and we all rode Harleys back then. And Eric would haul our Harleys to places and to Sturgis and those kind of places. We all rode together. So Eric found out the thing I told you about, the pretty boy badass thing, and he liked me. And instead of being a pretty boy, I was a pretty boy badass. So that made it okay for me to be. I wasn't just a punk pretty boy. You know, I wasn't just a prima donna. I could back it up. If you wanted to fight, you could step outside and fight. And everybody knew that about me. So it was okay that I was pretty because I was tough. Now, if you try to be pretty in this business, you get beat up. But I was able to be tough enough not to get beat up, so the guys liked me. And everybody liked me, and that's why I became part of the team, and everybody became friends, and I had a great 11-year career with them.
So then it comes to the point where the Monday Night Wars effectively come to an end. WCW, as you had said, is purchased by Vince McMahon. Everybody remembers that last edition of Nitro where Vince and Shane appear on the show. Sometime after the show, the Invasion storyline begins. WCW talent starts showing up on WWF TV. So at the time, given the talent that came with the sale, it's hard to argue that the three most recognizable stars involved in that are Booker T, Dallas Page, and yourself. You're actually a part then of wrestling history as you battle Booker T for the world title and what's the first WCW match on Raw.
First match of the Invasion, yes.
Yeah, so your run with WWF turns out not to be too lengthy, but if you wouldn't mind, just take us through the experience of first, finding out that you're going to be involved in that match.
Well, first of all, think about this. Here's what people don't understand. Is when we were told that we were going to be the first match of the Invasion, even though that seems great to a fan or listening in, what you guys don't know or haven't thought about was 7 days from then, what city were we in?
I do not.
Atlanta. So why would they put Booker T against Buck Bagwell in Tacoma, Washington? We know this ain't right. We're main event on Raw in Tacoma, Washington, and it ain't good. They can wait 7 days and put this in Atlanta and have 80,000 people standing at their feet watching Booker T wrestle Buck Bagwell. Instead, we got booed out of the building in Tacoma, Washington. And we had a bad match. Double whammy,
It doesn't make much sense planning-wise when you guys would be down in Atlanta for them.
Well, we couldn't say anything, but you couldn't say anything, of course. You're going to go to Vince. Hey, Vince, why are we main event? I don't understand. So we had to act like it. Everything was okay and normal, but we knew. So if you're asking me, they already knew they were done with WCW. They just were going to make us the sacrificial lambs to end it. There's no other reason to put us on in Tacoma. All they had to do was wait a week, and Booker T and Buck Bagwell would get over in Atlanta.
Of course.
Instead, we got buried in Tacoma.
In not so many words, we spoke with Scott Hudson recently, and he kind of had the same outlook, to be honest, as you did. And so after that, you left shortly thereafter. Was there ever a time after that there was any interest from yourself or from WWF, WWE?
They told me, they actually, believe it or not, they told me that they wasn't firing me, they were releasing me. And I said, guys, what's the difference? I said, Vince is in there, Johnny Ace, Jim Ross, and I actually raised my hand. And Vince goes, Buff, you don't have to raise your hand. And I said, well, Vince, I got to ask a question. What's the difference of releasing and firing? And believe it or not, they had an answer. They said, just like that. They go, well, see, Buff, if we release you, we can bring you back in 3 months like we're going to, and we ain't got to redo your contract. But if we fire you, we got to redo your contract in 3 months. I mean, it's just too much trouble. We're trying to make it easy for you. And I said, start shaking hands and start smiling. It's over. And that's what I did to myself. I just started shaking hands and smiling, and I left, and it was over for me. I remember getting in my car. I got in my $85,000 car, driving toward my $1 million house, and all of it was gone. And I remember calling my parents. That were in the stands and going, y'all come home. And they go, what do you mean come home? I go, I'm home. It's over. So they had to leave the Phillips Arena where there was 80,000 people at and come home. When I was home, it was over. They waited to fire me in Atlanta. Why made me come down there? Maybe drive down to Phillips Arena to fire me. You know, my God, how brutal is that? So I don't know if they hadn't figured it out totally or what, but I think they had. And when I really look back on the whole thing, when you hear me talk about it, why would they not put me and Booker in Atlanta? So I think they already knew they were done with us and just going to put us on the shelf. And they did so. You know, it was over. And the only reason you saw Buff Bagwell, Booker T, and Dallas Page first was because our contracts were up. So in other words, I could have sat at home for 3 more months and made another $100,000. I could have sat at home, made Vince pay me $100,000, but instead, I had so much heat. Well, I called my agent and I go, hey, what if we give Vince? What if we jump ship, not make Vince pay the $100,000, and just go to WWF right now? And my agent goes, I think that's the best idea you came up with. I did so, and I was fired in 2 weeks. I was like, can I get my $100,000 back, Vince? He said, I'm not sure, because I don't know what you're talking about. I said, oh, yeah, you did.
You know, Scum and Buff, I wanted to pop in here real quick and just ask you a real small question, something that's kind of occurring to me here as we're talking. You were speaking about the last match with Booker T up in Washington. And I spoke with Scott Hudson the week prior, and he had mentioned something about a major difference in the actual performance of the match between WCW at the time and WWE programming. Did anybody take the time to maybe explain to you or offer you any insight as to the different ways
That's what happened backstage after the match that me and Booker had in Tacoma. They took the blame. They acted like, Johnny Ace was trying to get a job too. Johnny Ace's job was the 12 WCW guys that came in his job was to fit them in the right way. Well, WWF, Pat, I can't remember his last name, took care of the main event matches for WWF. Well, Pat never talked to us, and so me and Booker's went out and did a regular WCW type style match. And so they wrote it off as their fault. It was their fault because Pat didn't tell us to finish. Johnny told us to go out and just have a regular match. We went out and got to give him a regular WCW old school match and got booed out of the building. But we did nothing wrong because we wasn't told different. So Booker tried to start blaming me. And I said, wait a minute, don't blame me, Booker. We've had 100 matches that were great. I said, this ain't me, brother. I said, we're out there together because you're right. I said, this ain't our fault, bro. We wasn't told by nobody what to do. So Johnny's job was in jeopardy. Pat should have talked to us, and they kind of wrote it off as their fault, and no big deal, and we just went on with it.
Sure.
Well, I show up 7 days later, and I'm fired.
Again, that is a tough ending. I personally, I would have liked to see, Buff stick around
I
and
think
have some matches.
I think they had a gold mine with WCW. Forget Buff. They had a gold mine. Buff, Sting, Luger, against The Rock, Stone Cold. I mean, it was endless, dude. It was endless, Y2J versus Sting, Buff versus Stone Cold. I mean, you could have gone on and on with that for wrestling fans, for wrestlers. I mean, you could have gone on and on, and you just, and the people just, instead they just beat us all and send us home.
Yeah, I think everyone would agree that the ball was dropped when they brought WCW, and it didn't, give everyone those matches that you just spoke of. I think everyone would agree there. So one last thing I wanted to touch on, Buff, before we signed off with you here is you also, over the years following that, appeared here and there with TNA. To me, that product always kind of reminded me of WCW and the production.
And it still does to me.
Yeah, and so I guess what I was wondering is, you were there, you were here and there with TNA, but there was never really that regular of a gig there. Personally, I thought you would be a perfect fit there.
Well, everybody else did too. I mean, like when from the first 12 guys went in, out of those 12, everybody knew I had a job. Everybody did. I didn't act like that. I wasn't cocky like that or walk around like that. I did what I was supposed to, kept my mouth shut, walked on thin ice. I knew the situation that Buff Bagwell had a job here. So I wasn't worried at all. When they fired me, totally threw me for a loop. I was like, I had to ask them. I go, are y'all firing me? And they said, no. And that's when they did the release thing. No, we're releasing you. And I go, I had to raise my hand again for the second time. I said, what's the difference? And they tell me that story I told you and all that. Start shaking hands, it's over. And it was, brother. It was over. They told me to call them back in 3 months. And I went from Bagwell to, oh, hey, Mark. And I went, hey, Jim, I'm just calling you back because you told me to. Yeah, everybody's calling back, Mark. We'll get back in touch with you. Thanks a lot. See you later.
With all your hard work to get your health back and everything you've been through, again, that TNA product is still there. I think you said you're only 43 years of age. Any chance we see Buff back involved with that?
I went down to the Gwinnett Center when they were here, and I just wanted them to see me. So I just walked in back, called Eric, said, do you mind if I come down to see you guys at TNA? He said, sure, come on down. So I walk in the back, looking like I'm looking like Buff Bagwell again. I'm in good shape and all that. And I walk in, Hulk Hogan walks all the way over to me, and I feel eyes burning holes in me. And Hulk walks up to me and goes, why are you not working for us? And I said, well, that's kind of why I'm here, Hulk. I was trying to figure out maybe why can I get a job? He said, dude, you're one of the only few guys left that we could bring in and it not have any heat. And he didn't realize what he had said. And I said, do you know why that is? And he said, no, why? I said, because I don't have any friends. And he started laughing and he went, you're right. He said, because if I brought in Brutus, I'd have to hear about it. He said, but if we brought in you, nobody would complain about it. I said, so I don't have any friends in the business. I said, I got a few friends and none that would get heat for it. I said, so he goes, dude, who's got your number? I said, Eric Bischoff's got my number. So I got text on my phone right now that I can send you. Eric Bischoff texted me and was excited, and I was excited. And then the main event Mafia thing started happening, and I thought I'd fit into that on Aces and Eights possibly. And I have heard nothing. and they know exactly where I'm at, and they know how to get in touch with me.
Well, I can say for one, I'd love to see you part of either of those organizations. That would be a great surprise.
I think like I said, before I talked to Eric, Sting was helping me a little bit, and Eric was saying positive things like, God, if nothing else, man, he's Buff Bagwell. So that's a positive statement, and it's true. If nothing else, put me in the background, dude. I'm Buff Bagwell. That's a pretty big deal, right?
It sure is.
Instead, They keep just shoving those kids down our throats every week that nobody knows. And I don't get it. Why not put somebody out there they know? Why do you think nobody's done the top hat? Because they can't do the top hat. If they put the top hat on, people are going to go, wait a minute, that's like that Buff Bagwell character. Nobody can copy the top hat. Let me go out and be over again. And I could be the biggest heel or the biggest baby face in the world if they let me. But they won't let me. I don't know why. All right, guys, you guys have a good one.
Okay, we really appreciate it. You too.
Whoa, man, there you have it, Scum. Buff Bagwell with a lot to say. It was pretty incredible to hear all his stories. Missy Hyatt getting him into the business, and the most amazing thing that I thought, this was incredible. He broke his neck 2 times on the same day over 10 years apart.
A real hard luck story in a lot of places, Steve. Again, we've spoke about it. I've said it. Our listeners know. I'm a big fan of the NWO era. Big fan of everything that was going on there personally. It is. It's incredible the tough luck this guy went through, injuries-wise. Not only injuries-wise. I mean, to break your neck same day, however many years apart. I think 98 was the one. The one was within recent history. Both on the same day. He's also, just the different hardships that he was talking about with his health. It's great that the guy is back in shape. It's great that the guy is, he obviously busts his ass to keep that up, like him or not, say whatever you want about him. He was a great guy with us. He was very accommodating, and I want to thank Marcus Bagwell for everything he did in setting up and arranging to come on with us. He's A-okay in my book. Not only the tough luck, though, with the health. When he talked about things like the Flair and Piper feud and calling his father and like, hey, Dad, we did it. Like, Piper at the pay-per-view in the boxing match, I won. They gave me a win over Ric Flair. And then you go for all intents and purposes to his hometown arena and a huge show at the Georgia Dome, and he has to put over David Flair. I know the angle at the time was Flair was the president, and he had his son, kind of cheated his way between Flair and the interference of Arn Anderson to the U.S. title. So it wasn't just Bagwell. There was Chris Benoit and Malenko and a lot of those guys that they had the storyline going with. But still, coming off that exciting kind of hometown crowd, and then you show up and you're laying down for David Flair. The guy, not to mention, we don't need to go into it. It's been talked about. Obviously, he's very emotional about it, as you could hear in the interview. At times, toward the end there, it was something that it's been said so much, I didn't even necessarily want to bring some of those things up. But, again, what kind of a broadcaster would you be if you didn't? The whole thing with the invasion when he came over, and again, I wasn't there. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. You hear the stories, you hear the different things. But obviously, the man kind of had the rug pulled out from under him for whatever reason. Again, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I know what I know of the guy. Again, you know the same that I know of the man. He was very accommodating to us, Steve. But obviously, there is some hard feelings there for Marcus as far as that whole thing went, the Booker T match, the invasion, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're out of a job. Again, a lot of tough luck. That what you asked him about when we were speaking with when he came back from the neck injury, and Rick Steiner, at that point in time, he thinks he's poised to be right alongside Sting and be one of the top dogs and the top baby faces, and then boom, you're going to be heel again. And as great as the NWO was, again, you're kind of a face in the crowd there, even though he got himself over. There's Hogan, there's Hall, there's Nash. That's a tough spot. So, not speaking of good or bad on it, but, it's easy for me to relate And to think, with some of the things that have gone on throughout the career of Marcus Bagwell, where he might have that type of attitude, maybe some bitter feelings there. But either way, we like to thank Marcus for coming on, and he was very gracious with us, and it was great to speak with him. And, I think that our readers and the readers of Glory Days Forum and our listeners I hope you enjoyed the interview, because we certainly enjoyed having them on.
Absolutely. And, Marcus Bagwell is a very good example of what you could expect from NWCW for the last 10 years of its existence. He was around for roughly 10 years, so we saw the early 90s where I think everybody in pro wrestling was struggling. Got into where was the NWO, super popular, the Monday Night Wars. He was right in the middle of it. Everybody did that move. We've talked about this a couple of times. There's no way you, as a wrestling fan, you or someone that you know as a wrestling fan, did that ridiculous move at some point at a party or out drinking or whatever every night for 2 or 3 straight years, if not more. He's very relevant in the sense of wrestling's glory days when it comes to the Monday Night Wars, the demise of WCW, Monday Nitro. And, of course, here's the one thing that I find very interesting is there's hundreds and hundreds of wrestlers every year that have their careers made or broken by potentially one wrestling match. But that match is generally at a very regional level. It's not in a national spotlight. It may be for a national company, but it's not televised. And they throwing a stinker of a match could cost them a career in one match. But rarely, if ever, does that happen on that level, where one person comes in and has one match and is highly touted, has been around for 10 years and is a common name amongst fans, a household name amongst wrestling fans, certainly Buff Bagwell. One match with Booker T, and his career gets demolished. Now, do you think that's legitimate? Is that the only reason?
Again, Steve, like I said, I can't really speak to it. We've proclaimed since we started the show. I don't know. I mean, I'm not backstage there in the dying days of WCW. I'm not backstage when the WCW locker room turns over and comes into the WWF locker room. Well, I mean, I stand corrected as you could speak for. There was one night in a Nitro in April of 2000 that I was actually backstage at Nitro, just by chance after about 40 beers, a good friend of mine, and we wound up with some passes and backstage. And actually what I remember about the locker room scene was a lot of fun. I mean, we were helping ourselves a beer out of DDP's cooler, hanging out with Mike Awesome was back there. Actually, we went snuck outside for a quick smoke, and our new friend, Marcus Bagwell, when we knocked, we thought we were locked out and blew it. He opened the door, and I don't know who we thought we were, but let us right back into the party. So as far as this horror story goes for me backstage in WCW in the year 2000, heck, the one time I was back there, it was a hell of a good time.
Yeah. You bring up something interesting there. You said you had a couple of beers out of Diamond Dallas Page's cooler. Was that actually called the Accountability Cooler?
Yeah, yes, it was. What it was is, years before its time, like a lot of people were sitting Indian style around it and kind of breathing heavily. Well, Steve, there were a couple more. Confessing. Yeah, confessing. A couple more items I wanted to touch on before we sign off here with the Bagwell interview. Some great spots. First off, I thought it was real interesting, the story of, and I can relate, you and I were, as we told Marcus, in a band together, and, in our college age years, we were no stranger to a good time, let's say, to put it mildly. The one thing that jumps out to me was as 19-year-old, I mean, granted, he was married. Now, imagine if that was our apartment complex, and Missy Hyatt, I mean, not the Missy Hyatt that's become the proverbial, let's say, catcher's mitt of today. The Missy Hyatt at that time, 1992, blonde, I mean, looking great. She specifically asked for the room across. Now, again, put the Scum in Bagwell's shoes in those days. And you got Missy Hyatt moving in across the hall, and she's looking for a good time. I mean, I know I can speak for you when I say she can bring her Eddie Gilberts over across the hall anytime she'd like, right, Steve?
Absolutely. Yeah, she has a real nice set of eyes. Yeah,
real nice. I think at the time she was doing commentary on WCW programming with Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously, who was rocking the Dangerous Alliance. I mean, at that period, to hell with Bobby Eaton and Arn Anderson and Zbyszko and a young Rick Rude and Steve Austin. I would. It's not too far of a stretch to say the real Dangerous Alliance there were sitting in Missy's shirt, if you hear what I'm saying.
Oh, I know what you're saying. Absolutely. Missy Hyatt, one of the first real knockouts, would you say?
Yeah. Well, I suppose another member of the Dangerous Alliance might have something to say about whose alliance was more dangerous, because wasn't Medusa a part of that group, too?
Well, there's a couple more alliances you need to worry about getting in your way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm not sure that you could call those a pair of Eddie Gilberts, but hey, who knows what was going on in the dressing room those days, right?
Maybe a pair of Bundys.
Yeah. Maybe you could say that Medusa was rocking a couple of bunkhouse bucks.
Oh, man. There must have been a stampede back there in that locker room. Remember the scene with Stan Hansen and Missy Hyatt?
Yo, classic. But, hey, on that note, but before we get going, if Missy was across the hall and she'd bring Medusa over in those bunkhouse bucks, maybe we could tie those bucks together with a bull rope or something and have a little fun, right?
This is Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. We're about to wrap it up, and is there anything else you wanted to add after this great interview with Buff Bagwell, man?
Yeah. One more thing I really liked hearing about that I specifically touched on was I love the combination of Bagwell and Steiner. I mean, that wasn't lip service. You know that. I mean, they had some great moments. They were hilarious playing off each other at the time, that spring break trip I was talking about. And I love to hear when he was saying Scott Steiner was Big Papa Pump 24/7. I mean, great stuff, because, man, he's right. On camera, he was a mean son of a bitch, And it's so believable. So, I think about that when he says he was at 24/7. If I remember those promos right, it was them and the Nitro Girls on that bus heading down to spring break, and every week they'd have the thing. So just given what would come out of Steiner's mouth at that time when they would do their promos, I mean, how does that play out for the Nitro Girls? I mean, honestly, here's what I'm envisioning. They show up, there's a couple of them missing. Like, where the heck is Spice? Or where is Che this week? Well, I don't know. And then you flip over and there's them wandering around somewhere. The sky's like purple. They have no idea where they are. They stop, and ask somebody, I'm in some place called Nirvana. And, and people are looking at him funny. Yeah, I'm not sure what's wrong with me, but uncontrollably, every few seconds, I'm not sure why this is happening, but I keep finding myself screaming boom shakalaka.
I'm waking up in like a purple haze. Like, I don't know where I am, and I'm screaming boom shakalaka uncontrollably.
Right, and obviously their hearing was pretty good, because each one of them seemed to be hollering from time to time, too.
Oh, man. Buff Bagwell and Scott Steiner were awesome. That is very true. They were good in the ring, too, man. They used to kill people.
Yeah. Well, again, all kidding aside, Buff Bagwell, say what you want about him. He certainly has his place in that era. He was one of the top stars. The dying days of WCW, he was a great in-ring worker. He was a star, to say the least. We once again want to thank him for coming on. He was a complete pleasure to work with, and we would, welcome him back at any time. And Steve, speaking of which, of welcoming guests, we've been using the analogy irons in the fire. Man, I think you can definitely vouch for me when I say, coming up, we have a lot of great irons in the fire. Maybe the best irons, the hottest. I mean, red hot. Just waiting to brand someone with them. We have some spectacular guests from the Glory Days coming up. I don't want to show my hand here, but trust me when I say we got good stuff coming up for you on the horizon. So stay tuned. Tune in with us every Sunday night, 6 p.m., WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on iTunes. And, again, just really excited for everything that's coming up. Thanks again to Marcus Bagwell. Steve, anything else from you, my man?
Oh, man, you said it best, brother. That's going to be all for us. See you next time on Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and follow us right here on YouTube. See you next time, folks.